So welcome back for our final session of the day. Hope you had a nice coffee break here at Bocconi and at home. So we go for module 7, and this is about the business requirements, the data model, and the data exchanges for traceability and transparency of sustainable and circular value chains in textile and leather. For this session, we have two members of the UNECE project team that are going to moderate the discussion and to present the key elements of the business requirement specifications developed as part of the project is Gerhard Heemskerk and Claudia Di Bernardino. And we have 3 speakers that will be panelists for the session: Piero de Sabbata, online, responsible for CROSS-TEC laboratory at ENEA and technical secretariat for eBIZ ENEA-EURATEX; Katie Shaw, Chief Program Officer at the Open Apparel Registry. Thank you, Katie, for being with us in Milano today. And Julie Brown, also online, CircularID Protocol Manager at the EON Group. And Julie is connected with us on video. Claudia, on stage, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Gerhard, do you want to? Okay. Okay, hello again, everyone. I'm Claudia Di Bernardino, and I'm joining you today with Gerhard, together with Gerhard, to drive you to the business requirements, the data model, the messages for traceability and transparency. And so Gerhard will give us actually a presentation on the standard on traceability and transparency that was developed during the UNECE project. Now, to start, what we have seen today is that traceability and transparency system can help companies to better understand and address the most relevant risks in their multi-tier supply chains. Just now, Piera, Marco, and Deborah. So tracking the provenance and journey of products and their inputs from the very start of the supply chain through to end use provide an opportunity for a company to connect with all the actors of the value chain and particularly understand what happened in the upstream part, and also to tell a story to consumer about the provenance and journey of products. And we've seen that with Simon today. So we have seen also that it's very important to make reliable and verifiable sustainability claims and how traceability is strictly linked to sustainability. But while traceability is the backbone of a sustainable product system to verify sustainability claims, traceability alone does not provide this verification, so it's vital that companies deliberately specify sustainability objectives and ensure that they incorporate appropriate data capture and validation methods into their approach, as well as choose the right technology that can meet their needs. So here, we wanted to focus on some concept behind the standard for information exchange, the concept of visibility, of traceability, transparency, and disclosure. Let's see now more in detail when we talk about visibility and we talk about transparency and disclosure. Are these words all have the same meaning? Well, actually, visibility is about identifying, collecting data from all links in the supply chain. So visibility is easy access to data that are current, that are accurate, that are complete, usually formatted. So visibility allows to know which companies, which products, materials, and processes the whole supply chain comprises, how they relate to each other. While disclosure is about communicating data, both internally and externally, at the level of detail desired. So it's about making available data of companies, product, materials, and/or processes to trading partners, to shareholders, to customer, consumer, and regulatory body. Now, visibility provides insight into data, making it available to the stakeholders, while transparency implies communication, implies accountability, making it easy to see the action performed. So the difference is insight into the present and future visibility versus openly communicating data and information and actively undesired outcome in the case of transparency. And the reality is that they're both needed. Now, I would like to move to this slide and to show you that within the UNECE project, we identify a set of information, traceability information and transparency information. What the traceability information are the ones that refer to the 5W, the why, the who, the what, where, and when, are the information on movement of an asset forward and backward through specified stages of the extended supply chain. When we talk about transparency information, we talk about sustainability data, additional sustainability data, we talk about the how. So information on sustainability performance of companies, of products, materials, and or processes. Now, transparency is defined also by what data you are going to be transparent about. Here, you can see the type of evidences that were defined within the UNECE project. The 5W, where, what, who, why, and when, that represent the event information that Gerhard will talk us about in a minute. And then we divided, again, the traceability information or evidences into the evidences into traceability and transparency. So when we talk about documents related to transactions, such as shipping notes, commercial invoices, all that kind of documents that prove the traceability, then we talk about traceability data. When we talk about certificates, audit, inspection reports, laboratory test result, declaration on sustainability aspect of a product or of a process, then we talk about transparency. And this classification it's very useful also. We've been using it during the pilot project, so for the data that need to support the sustainability claims. Moving now to the next slide. So before going to our first poll, because we would like the audience to participate to our session, so we would like to to tell you about disclosure, the importance of defining what to disclose and to who. So who will have access to the information, but also what kind of information you're willing to share as a company. Is going to be traceability, transparency information, and to which actors along the value chain. And this to introduce our first poll that relates transparency. So I'm going to read this poll with you. You can take the time to go through the answer, choose your answer, and then at the end of this session, we're going to discuss the result together with Gerhard and our speakers. So I'm going to look at the screen so I can talk better with you, Gerhard, as well. So what level of details do you require for transparency? And we want you to reply from a different point of perspective. So if you're a business or a government, or of course from a consumer perspective, you can reply to it. So do you believe that should be only the type of certificates and assessment reports, or a digital copy of certificates and assessment report? Sustainability performances, meaning all KPIs, easy processable measurements, all of above grouped by product, product batch, process, production facilities, party, location, and transportation. So please take a moment to look again at the answer and to reply to our first poll. And now I would like to give the floor to Gerhard for the first part of his presentation. It will drive us into the business requirement specification that he developed. So thank you, Gerhard, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. As said by Claudia, I have three topics this afternoon to present. One is about the business requirement specification for traceability and transparency, and then the data model and messages supporting these requirements. And the last topic is about a code list and identifiers. So first, of course, the business requirement specification. It has already been published for over a half year. And on the top of this slide, you will see the inputs for this business requirements specification. One of them is the initial contributions of UNCFACT. UNCFACT is the organization that creates e-business standards and maintains the UN library of data components. And this organization has already created a standard for animal track and trace, and also a standard for e-crop and a standard for e-laboratory results. So that kind of information we included in our data model. Next to this, we had some inputs from the policy recommendation, the business process analysis, and the feedback from experts during workshops, of course. And this has led to two documents. One is focusing on the processes within textile and leather, and the other document is focusing on the use cases regarding information exchange for traceability and transparency. When having a close look inside the business requirement specification, on this slide it looks quite technical. You will see a number of diagrams, but the information in this document is mainly just plain text describing the functional requirements and the definitions. But those diagrams are very useful for developers and implementers to get a quick overview of what is happening in the sector. And that's why it starts with a scope diagram, the actors involved on the right side, the processes, and of course what is very important, the data structures. And at the last, a diagram that describes the information exchange between systems and business partners. But the main requirement in the BRS remains, in fact, that we need visibility. And therefore, we have found a solution, but as you can see here on this slide, the supply chain is not as simple as shown here. It is in practice even more larger than the cotton and the leather value chain, because there are a lot of subcontractors and traders that can be in between, even cooperatives. And it is very difficult for the actors downstream to get even information back from tier 2, 3, etc. And as you can see here, the events that are happening, like transformations and transfers between partners, that information cannot go easily to the end of the supply chain. And therefore also the related sustainability information around the processes that have been occurring in those different stages. I need some water.
This is yours?
No.
Thank you. Yes,
okay, I will move on. Yeah. So the need is to have a traceability system in which we can share information in order to get the needed visibility.
Yeah, that is fundamental, as we mentioned, visibility, both visibility and transparency.
And thank you very much. And this traceability system in which we share information should link all together. And in fact, to build a strong trace information. And for this, we need, in fact, unique identifiers, or global unique identifiers, the better, to have them for the facilities, the locations, and also for the materials and products. And by this, we can build a strong trace of information. And as you can see here on this slide, this shirt can come from different farmers, from different ginners, and the yarn can be spinned by different, sorry, the ginners and the spinners. Okay, so that's why it is very vital to have unique or global unique identifiers. When we have a helicopter view on all the requirements in the BRS, I have divided them in 4 groups. One is about transparency, getting more information about a product, about a process, about a facility, about certification. So that are entities where we want to have more information about. The next one, requirements, is about sharing data. And especially when we share data, we want to have standardized data. But also, we want to have some rules about the disclosure or the access right of this information. And next to this, requirements about tracing. We want to trace back to the origin of material, but also we want to have a close look on different models we want to implement, like product segregation. And at the end, the most important part for this data model is the exchange of messages between partners. And in this case, it is about events and transparency data, and mostly on sustainability. So exchanging standardized data, that's in fact a very vital part. And standardized data about traceability, and standardized data about transparency. And this can be done by creating or having data components, and next to this, code list and identifiers. And these are the components for messages, and at the end, we will have standardized messages in that respect. Standardized messages to exchange event data, and on the other side, information about sustainability. So the need for sharing is also a part in this document. There is a lot of information already available in the ERP systems of business partners, such as events happening during the process, and probably also information about certifications. And this information needs to be shared, and the first important step is to share the events that are happening, like events about transformations and transfers of goods. So first, that should be shared in a repository. So on the basis of that information, an information requester can then ask the involved business partner for additional information. That's the normal way as described in the BRS. But depending on the capabilities of the shared repository, it's possible that this shared repository allows, according to the requested access rights and disclosure requirements of the business partner, to also upload this information next to the event data in the shared repository. And by this, the information requester has one single point of access of both the event data and the transparency data holding the sustainability data. And we have created the possibility to provide, in fact, in the data model, you can be very minimum on the data you would exchange about transparency. For example, you start with level 1, exchanging just the name and type of certificate you have, or assessment type. And you can grow in this, or you can extend in this way further to provide more details about the certificate or an assessment. And, or you provide a copy, attachment, or you provide a URL, a link to that document. Another way is to go a step further and to provide measurements, KPIs, which you want to share with your business partners. But all this information could also be linked to the information regarding a product, or information regarding a process, or information regarding a facility. So next to having product data, you could also add those information components like the KPIs or the certificate assessment that can be part of the product information or can be part of the process information. So that's all in the data model supported. And this is a close look at the evidence documents you talked about earlier. And as you can see here, we have here for transparency, the most vital documents are, of course, certificates or assessments. And you can see more details here that could be provided by a business partner or another organization, a certifier, to provide more information about what has been examined before, for example, the objects, as we call it, and the type of objects, or even the ID of the object that has been examined. And also more information about the expiry date of the certificate, etc. And also, as you can see here, an attachment can be included, including a URL if needed, or instead of. And on the bottom you see traceability, evidence document, and then at the moment this is a reference to a type of document and an ID, and if more information is needed, then you can provide, of course, also an attachment or URL, but this information could be extended in the future because the data model has this information already available, but we have chosen not to use too much information in this first step. And this is also a very important part of the data model, the sustainability characteristics. This is used to exchange KPI measurements. And as you can see here in this example, we have taken a measurement of the nitrate amount per microgram per kilo in the sole. And we have used these characteristics and characterized this characteristic according to the ITC, the International Trade Center themes, sub-chapters, and criteria. Because by having these categories of I2C, you give a particular meaning to this characteristic, and it becomes also comparable. Because without everyone choosing a kind of category, it's like product categories, it doesn't get any more comparable. And as you can see here, there are different ways to express the value of a characteristic. It can be just as plain text. You can also express it as a value measure, like, as you can see here, 60 NA. But it is also possible to include a file, an attachment, a PDF, with these numbers, or these measurements, or even, as said before, a URL to express the same results. So as you can see, there are a lot of possibilities to express a value of a measurement. And this is in fact the last slide of all the requirements that are listed in the business requirements specification. And I would say now over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So before moving into the second part, Gerhard, just a slide to summarize what we're going to see actually the data model together, because that you developed, because the textile and leather process and data model that have been developed specifically focus on addressing the negative health, social, and environmental impact of textile and leather operation. So the sector is able to indicate its own specific information exchange requirements while also complying with the overall relevant process and data structure. So as you can see in this slide, we have put the sustainability focus into a data model for textile and leather. And the result is that now we can create the required information exchange. Now, I would like to launch the second poll of this session. What kind of specific information exchange will be required sooner or later, in your opinion, either from a business, government, consumer perspective? So you can answer to this question depending on that. So first answer, certificate and/or assessment report, inspection reports, chemicals compliance report, waste disposal and recovery reports, or if you believe that these are not the specific information exchange that will be required, you can also select other. And maybe in that case, please feel free to contact us over the chat and answer this question. We will be happy to really listen to your answer, even if it's a different one. So you have few seconds to look at the question and come back to us with the specific information exchange that you believe will be required sooner or later. And now I will close this poll and give back the floor actually to Gerhard to move forward to the next topic of the agenda on data model and messages. So please provide us with an overview.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Now, moving from the business requirements to the data model and messages supporting these requirements. First, I want to explain the position of the textile and leather data model within the UN library. On the top of this slide, you will see the complete UN core component library, as it is named. And this library contains the data components of about 10 domains within UNCFACT. And because this library is so large, UNCFACT has decided to create subsets of this library, and one of them is the buy, ship, pay reference data model. And this data model is, in fact, as it almost tells us, is for trade, transport, and finance. And even this data model is still quite large, and therefore it has already been subsetted in 4 parts. And one of the parts is the Sustainable Development and Circular Economy Reference Data Model, of which the textile and leather data model is part of. When looking inside this data model, you will see a lot of components. It seems a lot, but in fact, it's what we see as relevant for textile and leather. And therefore, there are components, data components related to sustainability, to a product, to production processes, to transportation. One I forgot, that's related to traceability, and other generic components like a trade party, a trade address, a trade country. So these are quite interesting data components that come for 70% of what is listed here. They come from the base library, the UN core component. That means that a lot of these data components are already in use by other domains. And that makes the interoperability of this information with under other domains higher than when inventing new ones. So that's a quite interesting aspect of this data model. And also, as you can see on the bottom of this slide, the traceability event data components, they are data components, they are compliant with the ISO traceability standard named EPCIS. So a lot of standards what UNCFACT creates are, if possible, based on another international standard if possible. So from this data model, we should at least start to share information in a traceability repository. And this is just showing that we are going, or a few of the types of events are listed on this slide. We are going to put information about transformations and transfers or shipments into this repository to be able to get visibility, of course. And it is not much information. We always talk about the 5 Ws, and these are at the bottom of this page for every event listed. But in practice, this information is already somewhere. What Virginia already told us, that this information occurs at one particular moment in the process, and it is already somewhere in a document. And the only thing we have to do now is to collect these pieces of information and to share it in a repository. It just goes another direction. Instead of a piece of paper, for example, or an electronic message, it will be shared in a repository. And the data is in practice always or mostly captured by scanning, like scanning a box that has been received, or a pallet, etc., has been received or sent away. So looking inside of the event data, we see that there are 4 types of events. It's on the right side. And one is an object event. What is happening with the traceable object? And it can be, it has been shipped, has been received. There can also be a transformation. input materials has been used to create a new output material. It can also be an aggregation event. That means that it has been packed onto a pallet or it has been unpacked. And the last one is about the transaction event. It's already told by Virginia, in fact, that says that a traceable object has been put on an invoice or a delivery note. And on the left side, you will see the information that can be specified for each event. And as you can see, in the middle, you will have those 5 W's, the when, where, sorry, I have not my glasses on, but you can imagine I can imagine the what, etc., and the why, and especially the why. Yesterday or this morning, there was a finishing process, but the finishing process can be very granular, like washing, etc. And that's, in fact, in our library, we have coded all the process steps. So if somebody wants to share an event on that level, it would be possible. So we have checked all the business process analysis on all kinds of business steps, and we made sure that we have codes for those different process steps. So if you want to be precise, it's possible. This means also for the what in this model, I can be precise about a product type. I can also be precise about the batch. I can also be precise about an individual product, for example, a serialized product. And this slide is now about the transparency data, because the previous slide was about traceability. And this slide shows that we made sure for the 7 key information components, like product batch, location, party, etc., that all those key components, and here you see product enlarged, all those key information entities have information related to sustainability. So as you can see somewhere, there is sustainability characteristics, there is something about inspection, etc. That means that I can exchange information also about the facility where I can specify inspection details done for that facility. So it can be provided from a different angle, so to speak. So when doing this from the angle of a product, as you can see here, we have in this product message, it's just an example, we have included information about an assessment. It can be included information about a certificate, information about sustainability characteristics, information about an inspection, and information about the claim that is supported by the product as mentioned in this message. And this just shows the extendability of the product data we exchange. Because in UNCFACT, we have components that are also in use by other domains. So in this slide, you will see that a number of elements have been switched off because we regard it in this stage as not relevant. So when we need extra elements, and then we can switch it on, depending on the needs. We don't have to create them because our library is so large, it can cover almost any need there is. And the same applies for messages. We have now created a product transparency message, but we could also create other messages with a specific purpose. And that refers to the poll question number 2. And here I have put some other examples, but in fact, having all those components in the textile and leather data model, we can just pick those components and build the message we want. I guess this is the last one of this section.
This is a key point that you actually just mentioned. And yes, here we're just to mention before we go into the next part of the presentation that we agree on a common standard for information exchange. And basically this agreement was based on processes and data structures. So processes to provide the necessary information for traceability and transparency, and data structure to be exchanged. That includes message content, code list, and identifier. And now with Gerhard, we're going to look at the code list and identifier. He's going to drive us into the code list and identifier. Something that I wanted to underline is that the adoption of a common standard, we know they play a relevant role. For instance, allowing the investment for each firm to participate in the game, for achieving a longer lifetime of the adopted IT solution. It offers also a state of art as a benchmark for collaborative processes to be implemented, and also can increase perceived benefit thanks to a large number of adopters that are partner technically ready to collaborate. But there are also many challenges to be tackled, and this is why I would like to address you the last question. I'm going to launch the last poll that relates to the challenges of introducing a common standard for garment and footwear sector. So I'm going to read quickly the answer and give you the time to address this poll. So which is the main obstacle of introducing a common standard for garment and footwear sector? Insufficient perceived benefits, lacking interoperability between different solution conflicts with the high dynamicity of them to business relationship, differences at the business level, including not only the content of data messages, but also the organization of business processes. Take a moment to look at this question. You know the answer already, Gerhard. You have an idea already of the answer, but don't say. Okay.
I think number B.
Oh, don't say. So we will discuss that later. But thank you all for joining the poll, and I will leave you again the floor to discuss about code lists and identifiers.
Okay, thank you, Claudia.
Thank you, Gerhard.
Code lists and identifiers. That's an essential part in information exchange, because with the code, information is easy to be validated instead of plain text, of course. And next to this, it makes information comparable, and also because of this, it improves interoperability between systems or software. And also, it avoids duplicates. So it is very important to have and to use code lists and identifiers, and for this reason, we have created a reference guideline, and this reference guideline with a number of code lists, about 30 different types of code lists, coming from around 15 agencies, are listed in this document, and also a number of identifiers coming from 15 types of identifiers, from a product identifier till like consignment ID, etc., are listed in this document. And also the majority of organizations or agencies that provide these code lists. They are from, the most are from UNECE, from the European textile standard eBIZ, but also code lists from Textile Exchange, ISO, and the World Customs Organizations. And perhaps I forget some, but a lot of is listed in this document.
Line on the UNECE project documents.
But a lot of information is also, there are URL links in this document where you can go directly to the website of the agency publishing these code lists or identifiers. And this is a slide about, just as an example, that regarding code lists, the data model is very flexible, because when we have a code, for example, a type code of a product, then we can specify the agency that has issued this code. So we do not make elements expressing the type like fiber type, or we do not create numerous elements for expressing a type of product, but we are using code lists. And even for the agencies, we can have different agencies to be used within the data model. And that applies also to product classification. And regarding product classification, you have different types available in this document, and that's because of the context where you're in. For example, when you do global trade, you export, then mostly you have to use the World Customs harmonization system codes to put on a form, and many standards or other standards like Textile Exchange, they map their code to the customs code, for example. Yeah. So that happens in practice. And even I forgot to put on this page the UN standard for product and services codes. So we have also classification, and that also maps to other classification standards.
Yes.
The same for identifiers. It is flexible. We can use also the agency to express what is the agency that has issued this code list. So we do not have for each agency a separate element. Otherwise, we could end up with 400 elements, because there are 400 agencies that issues identifiers. And here I have an example of the OER that can be expressed as a global ID, and then together with the OER, the receiver knows this identifier is issued by OER.
Okay.
And the same for the trade party, for ZDHC. Okay.
Good.
The last one, the key points, very important, is that all the work what has been done is coming from a larger framework, from the international supply chain reference process and data model by ship pay of UNCFACT. The processes have been specified according to the rules of UNCFACT, the BRS, and also the BPAs are available to support all this specification. The semantics, they have been created in such a way that they are generic, but also customizable and extendable. Yeah, so we can use more if we want, and also there is a possibility to request new code lists.
And these are key points that I believe we will address also with our speakers today.
Yes, also especially the last one, technology independent, because processes and semantics, they mostly remain. Technology changes. So all the work
That's
does
true.
not have to be again over again, because when a technology changes.
That's true.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's all.
Thank you very much, Gerhard. So now together I think we can introduce our speakers again and welcome them. So Piero de Sabbata and Julie should be connected, Julie Brown should be connected online. I don't know if we can put their slide on screen, please. At the beginning of the presentation, probably, so we can visualize that. But first of all, we have Piero with us, so I would like to welcome Piero and thank you for joining us today and to join the session. So, Piero, we would like to ask you to please share with us your vision on traceability in the garment and footwear sector and the role that standardization plays in it. I know you have a presentation to present as well, so we would like to put the presentation as well and
yes,
welcome you
I
in the
should
discussion.
wait for it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't see it for now.
It's coming, but in the meantime, if you want to introduce yourself, Piero, it's Piero.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, here we go. It's coming. Perfect. Okay, the floor is yours. Thank you, Piero.
Thank you. I am Piero de Sabbata. I work at ENEA, and I have a double role in this context because I have also the role of contributing to the maintenance and technical evolution of eBIZ as a secretariat of eBIZ. That is the effort for creating a common language for the supply chain of the textile and the clothing industry in these years. I am happy to be here, and now I would like to share with you some consideration because we have been happy to contribute to this work on traceability that was not in the scope of eBIZ. And I would like to say that we today have the result of a huge work that has been done by UNECE and by its experts. Next slide, please. I think that my role today is to put in evidence some aspects that could ask for some kind of further reflection, further thinking about what we are doing. A first point that since the beginning it was evident for me is that when companies think to sustainability and consumer engagement, they have different approach to the aspect of traceability. When we think to the consumer engagement, that is something that is more in the focus of the companies, at least at the beginning, we think to the necessity to engage consumers with fascinating storytelling. We think to be able to show a sort of passport, a sort of history of your products. When we think to sustainability, that is our focus today, we are more related with the firm's organization, their plans, their features, their situation. Here we don't want to have greenwashing, so we need for evidences or certification. This means that there is a different perspective that is not only for gain the engagement of the consumer, because it is important, but is a slightly different thing, and we need to invest on this. Next slide, please. The second point for me is that we have a problem. We will have a problem about what I would like to call the bubbles of confidentiality. When we think to a new product, when we think to know-how, specific know-how for the production of something, we have to think that probably in the fashion industry we have a know-how that is starting from the very beginning, know-how related with the raw material, about how to work with it, how to spin it, how to weave it, dye, and any kind of finishing and treatment. And probably not all of this information would be shared with all the actors of the supply chain. So we need to be able to understand what have to be in the framework of the visibility of the information and what is in the area of what must be confidential because it is an asset of the company. I think that this is one of the obstacles that is preventing the adoption of solution based on third-party platforms. We saw this with the difficulties in the B2B platforms, in the difficulties in the involvement of companies in a common platform managed by a third party. Usually companies want to be able to be sure that their data are safe. On the other hand, now we work in a world where consumers don't believe anything, and an internally hosted evidence of something is not so much relevant for consumers rather than something that is public, that is clearly defined and cannot be changed. I expect that technologies like blockchain, but any other kind of solution that allow us to have different level of disclosure, that assure us that things cannot be modified, but are, for example, available only for inquiring authorities in case of dispute. And so maybe a way to save, to let's say, overcome some of these problems or some of these difficulties. The next one. Okay, and that is the final great problem, because the problem is that we need to lower the technological threshold to begin to play for the companies. That is threshold based on technology, on skills, but also on easy guidance in order to create an implementation of something. Gerhard told us an important thing, that is in the framework of the work that has been done, there are a lot of possibility to represent different level of information, granularity, type of certificates, and there has been an effort that is important to reduce the not needed information. What I see is that that is one of the points, because even if we have a common language, if we have an ambiguous language, we have to think to the cost for the software that have to be able to manage such information, and this should be reduced as much as possible. That is, for example, one of the points for what, because we thought that, for example, the work that was already done with the eBIZ specification should be able to contribute to this work. For example, by considering to create bidirectional mapping with the existing effort that was made for a eBIZ specification that were very tailored, very specific for the process of the sector. And by the way, I can tell you that we are managing a project that is named TRIC project that probably will work on this aspect. Other aspects, okay, are more on aspect of technology like automatic semantic checking, blah, blah, blah. What I think that is the last point that is the most difficult probably is that for the next step, probably one of the problems will be the reduction of the complexity of the jungle or of labels, certification, and so I understand that a lot of them have an important role, They are very relevant, and in some cases they are a solution for problem of verification of what is happening along the supply chain. But I would like to mention a work that has been done in the district of Carpi, where they discovered that at the end of the game, the 80% of the requirement for ethical social issues of 4 different questionnaires diffused for second-party certification were the same, with different words, but were the same. So here there is a problem. Maybe the market will be able to solve this, but I don't think this could be one of the next step for helping companies in managing this complex situation. Next one. Okay, in conclusion, I see that some decisions have been taken, has been solved by this work that has been done in the UNECE framework, the paradigm based on events, who inputs which information, where are the proof of truth of something, and so. Still there are open aspects, in my opinion, because, for example, the granularity of the data related to process, to lot, to serial elements are still open, because probably when you put in place a real supply chain with the real traceability processes, probably you have to decide this. And if you are misaligned, you cannot work on this. Secondly, there is an open about the governance, because the creation of such kind of infrastructure probably will require some kind of governance. And also probably we have to build an ecosystem actors around this activity of related with traceability. That is all. I thank you for your patience, and I hope to wish the best for the work that at the end is only the beginning.
Yes, thank you very much, Piero. Thank you. That was really, really interesting, and you touch a point that is the one related to the data privacy and data confidentiality. That is, of course, a very relevant now and sensitive topic that must be addressed, and is one of the most feared probably from the company. So one side, we really need to find this trade-off between transparency and confidentiality, and that it's very important. But there are also coming legislation on that, the digital strategy, the data strategy. So we actually are going there, and also there are instruments that we can put in place in order to make the industry more confident on the sharing of data that is fundamental if we want to achieve transparency. Well, just one comment before we move into the next speaker. Actually, a question, but very briefly, Piero, if you can answer to this question on SMEs, because in this industry, particularly the SMEs as a incredible role. I mean, the garment and footwear industry is basically made by SMEs. So I would like to know what will make a standard easy adoptable for SMEs, and in your view, how could the UNECE project support the adoption of the standard by SMEs? Just a quick comment on that, because we will give the floor to our other 2 speakers.
Yes, it is a very complicated to give a safe answer. I think that
maybe just pick one specific challenges, because I know there are many. I'm thinking about time, resources, adoption, usability,
yes,
too many.
I think that the main point is to be able to offer something that does not cost too much from the organizational point of view, because I think that the main difficulty is on the effort in terms of people, of activities.
Skills,
if we are able to start from there already in place activities, we can support them with technology, whatever else, and then be able to add more value on this.
Okay.
I think that is the key point.
So the key point, in your opinion, to summarize, is resources, the extent of human and economic resources that prevent sometimes SMEs participation.
Yes, but also thinking to an ergonomic approach
Yes.
to the introduction of what we are doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Piero. Thank you. And I would like now to leave the floor to Katie Shaw, that is here with us in presence, and she's the Chief Program Officer of Open Apparel Registry. I would really like from you, Katie, to elaborate on the importance of having an open source tool mapping garment facilities worldwide. So please, Kate, introduce us to the Open Apparel Registry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I just want to pause on this visualization of our approach with the Open Apparel Registry, because I really want to emphasize that a really important part of our approach is about truly opening up data for the benefit of all. And the way that we're tackling that with the Open Apparel Registry is we're really focused on transforming messy and inconsistent data sets into structured data sets and making them freely accessible to all stakeholders under an open data license. And that open data license is a really important part of our approach, because when everyone working in global supply chains enjoys equal access to quality data, opportunities rapidly open up to shift industries onto a more sustainable and equitable path. So if I move on to the next slide, this is the Open Apparel Registry. So it is a neutral and open source tool in which we're mapping garment facilities worldwide and allocating a unique ID to each of those facilities. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. You've got a spoiler alert of the next slide about how we structure those OAR IDs and why they're important. But if I give you all a little bit of a sense, for those who might not be so familiar with Open Apparel Registry, about what we've achieved so far in our goal to map all garment facilities worldwide. So we launched the tool in March 2019, and we now have around 68,000 facilities in the database. And those facilities have been contributed by hundreds of different organizations across the sector, whether that's major global brands and retailers, it might be certification schemes, some of the big multi-stakeholder initiatives like ZDHC are contributing data, and that is processed. We've heard talk of the need to eliminate duplicate facilities. All of that data is processed by our algorithm to eliminate duplicates and to return to users a match where a facility already exists in the database. And if it doesn't already exist, we create it, and that new facility is allocated its own OAR ID. So here is the OAR ID. So as I said, each facility is allocated its own. And it's really important to emphasize that these IDs don't replace existing schemas, but what they do is serve as a central source of truth alongside name and address data to enable interoperability between systems. So it's something that we've heard Gerhard and other speakers talk about today. This is a really important part. By switching to IDs as opposed to facility names, that's a really crucial step in the process to enable more interoperability and to connect disparate data sets.
Very much. So one question comes to my mind listening to your presentation. Why is the benefit to having a global identifier such as the OAR ID for facility in relation for information exchanges?
Yeah, sure. So I touched on that very briefly just now. Confusion around facility identification creeps into supply chains. We happen to be very focused on apparel, but this is a sort of problem that is present across multiple different sectors. That confusion creeps in for any number of different reasons. It can be to do with transliteration issues, where you're translating facility names from a native language into English. It can be as simple as basic data entry errors. And so by switching to using an ID as opposed to a name for identification, you eliminate that confusion. Everybody knows that they're speaking about the same place, and then that enables that interoperability that we've been speaking about.
This is a key word, interoperability. Yes, thank you for bringing it up. So I'd like to move now to our last panelist that is connected virtually. Thank you, Julie Brown, that is CircularID Protocol Manager of EON Group. Hello, Julie, are you there? Hi, Julie, nice to see you and welcome. Welcome to our session and thank you for being here. So I would like to ask you, we would like to hear from you about the recent work that on the CircularID data protocol developed by EON and how this connected to the UNECE traceability data model. Yes, we would like to know.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Great, and I apologize I don't have slides, so I'll try to be very clear in the way I speak about this.
Thank you.
Today, the challenge is that we are unable to identify and manage these products and materials in the circular economy in a way that's essential for a sustainable fashion and retail industry post-point of sale for a product. So as Gerhard explained, we know the importance and presence of product identification and product data, and that production data before the point of sale. It is collected, it is stored, and all of those different pieces of information can be made available. But at point of sale, all of that product identification gets disassociated with the product, right? Consumers buy it, and it might be part of a barcode or part of a tag or something that's affixed to the product. But as soon as that product is purchased, that tag is removed. And that means that all of the data associated with that barcode or associated with that tag is also disassociated from the product. So that information is lost. But a lot of that information is critical for a circular economy, for recyclers, for resellers to be able to optimize their operations. And so that ability to scale product value in the circular economy has a huge barrier just because the data that is needed in order to do this has been taken off of the product, has been away from the product. So by the time recyclers or resellers collect the products they need to do their job, the data about that product is not there. So digital identification can be a solution to this problem. This is where information and data about a product and its production can be stored long-term and can be physically affixed to a product. So think of including a QR code or an NFC chip in a zipper, something that can be permanently embedded onto a product that stays with that product throughout its life, even throughout its second life or third life, which is the vision. And so that QR code or that chip could be tapped or scanned throughout its life cycles and pull up the essential data about this product. So if you are that recycler or reseller or someone that really creates these circular business models, you're able to still see and access the data that you need in order to operationalize that circular economy and really optimize it. And so we want to make sure that that digital identification captures the most essential identity data points. So things like what material is this, and are there any chemical finishes used, and what was the original price at the point of sale? All of those things that can be really helpful to recyclers and resellers. And so there needed to be a list of data needs identified and a format for this data identified. And so that that need created the Circular Product Data Protocol. It has formerly been called the CircularID Protocol. So now it's the Circular Product Data Protocol. It was developed by EON and the CircularID Initiative, and it allows for the identification and communication of product and material information to recyclers and resellers to enable a circular economy. So it serves as a shared language for digital identification of products in the circular economy for fashion and retail. So this way, data regarding a product doesn't end once it's sold. It stays with the product and it follows the product throughout its life cycle to empower circular business models to unlock data and systems that are essential for maximizing value and recovery of products and materials. And we've been able to do a mapping of the protocol to the UNECE product entity, and it's really promising for the interoperability of the different data models. It actually maps quite well. And something that Gerhard also mentioned as one of his key points was how it needs to be technology independent, right? So this data protocol is actually going to be gifted to the industry under a Creative Commons license next month. And so anyone and any technology solution provider will be able to use this protocol and access this shared language to be able to help maximize the use of this data and a consistent format, and make sure that that shared language can really be used.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was really interesting and actually proves as information exchange standard can really advance circularity also, and in the textile and leather sector. This is a key point. So now, before closing the discussion, I would like to look at the poll. We have a few minutes left. So if possible, thank you very much once again for all of you. Thanks to Piero and to Julie and to Katie. But I hope you will actually comment us the poll with us. So let's start with the first poll. The first question. You don't have the question, you have just the answer. So I'm going to find the question. I need the question first so we can read the question together. The question of the poll. Sorry. I thought it was on screen. No, okay, thank you very much, thank you. So, okay, our first poll was, what level of detail do you require for transparency? And we can see that 41% of you replied that all of above group by product badge, process, production, facility, party, location, and transportation. And so basically, half, like 26 and 26, believe that both the digital copy of certificates and assessment report and the sustainability performance, meaning all KPIs, are relevant, and these are the detail, the level of detail that need to be required for transparency. But for the majority, actually all of above grouped. So the types of certificate and assessment report, the digital copy, the sustainability performance, all this should all be there. Do you agree with the answer, Gerhard? Do you want to make a comment on that?
I expected this outcome,
this kind of,
especially the last one. I'm quite.
Yeah. And just few, 7, only the type of certificate. It was just few of them. Okay. Okay, I don't know if there is someone that wants to add a comment, maybe Piero, on this poll, or if we move on to the next one. Piero, you would like to join the discussion on that question?
Comment. Very short.
Yes, please.
I think that this answer reflects the situation of uncertainty, because the company says we are not sure about what really we have to prove. And so it is better to have everything available.
Yeah.
It is my interpretation of this answer, at least.
Right. So we can now move to the next poll and look at these. Oh, wow. Okay, that's very interesting. So the question was, what kind of specific information exchange will be required sooner or later, either from a business, government, consumer perspective? And I must say that half of the audience think that certificate and or self-assessment report will be needed and required. And the other half of the audience think that waste disposal and recovery reports should be exchanged, should be the most important information to be exchanged. So this is a very interesting poll, in my opinion. Inspection and laboratory report and chemical compliance reports didn't receive that much, let's say, attention. But it is interesting to see that both certificate and assessment report and waste disposal and recovery reports should be there. So probably they should be mixed together. They're both information that sooner or later will be required. Do you have a comment on that, Gerhard?
The first I expected, certainly, because in the blockchain pilot,
Yeah.
we are exchanging, in fact, certificates. And about the waste, it's very promising that the community would like to do something about recycling. And in that respect, it's very promising, the last one.
And also we will go more into details of this kind of document and evidences for traceability and transparency tomorrow during our module 8 dedicated to the pilot project that were conducted on cotton and leather. And now the last poll, the question was, which is the main obstacle of introducing a common standard for garment and footwear sector? Insufficient perceived benefit, lacking interoperability, or differences at business level. And here the 57% of you think that there are differences at business level, including not only the content of data messages, but also the organization of business processes. So there is a common agreement on that, I would say. What do you think, Gerhard, on that?
Of course, you have systems that have been developed for a particular industry, and in this case, it is quite, because the sector is complex. So,
very complex.
And you have the different
right.
industries within the sector, and that creates, of course, that the interchange is quite complex when you want to exchange data perhaps between industries or even within the industry. So
yes,
I can imagine that the third one came out.
So now I would like to, first of all, thank all the panel, Gerhard, and all the panelists that joined the session with us. And before leaving all of you, I would like to ask Piero, Katie, and Julie very briefly if they want to have a final remark on the session. So to share with us a final reflection on what we have during this session, like super briefly. Do you want Katie to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from my perspective, the key points that have been coming through in this session are around interoperability of data sets. And then, you know, similar to the approach that we're taking, I think it's really exciting to hear from Julie that they are opening up their data and it will all be publicly available under a Creative Commons license. So from my perspective, the movement from closed data sets and away from these confidentiality bubbles that Piero was talking about to making this open and accessible are the kind of key themes that really struck me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask now if they're still connected, Piero and Julie, who wants. Julie, do you want to give us a final remark on this session? A final word to go home with from today's session, please?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It's really inspiring to see the level of openness and the level of just attention that's paid to these data models today. There have been a barrier in the past to really scaling sustainable practices and transparency, and this is a way that it can really be done. So it's really nice to see it. A couple other points I want to bring up is around adoptability and how we all want this data to be perfect. We all want it to know everything. We all want to know all of the detail. But there are more barriers of adoption that we have to be careful about. And it might take time and different versions and evolutions of these data models over time to add more and more detail as the industry gets on board. I've seen a big barrier to adoption just be that level of detail and that level, and people tend to, or organizations might tend to close themselves off and not want to share so much detail. And so it's going to take a little bit of ramping up and maybe starting with just basic information at first and adding more detail as time goes on to get where we all want to be. And also that training is also a really important, an important aspect here. Whenever these data models are released, it's important to think about the training resources that are available behind those to make sure that again, once these data models are available, once they are accessible, that's all great. But actual implementation and understanding how to use them will be critical for their scale throughout the industry.
Thank you very much. And one last remark very quickly from Piero, if you want to.
Very fastly, I think that at the end, the problem is not solely an IT problem of specification. We have to build around this problem an ecosystem of actors, skill, training, tools, services that allow people to work on this and to overcome the initial threshold to work on this.
Thank you very much. And I would like to close this session now with Gerhard just saying that the needs and benefits for a standard on traceability are clear. Not only the development of such standard is important, it is also important dissemination and awareness about standard and global classification. These are really equally important and need to be supported. So I like that was mentioned by Julie, the role of training. That was also what we're doing today here. So I will leave the session, leave all of you with that, and thank Gerhard very much for the presentation, for driving us into this amazing work that is there.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and thank you very much, Gerhard, for leading us through this final session of the day, very important piece of work under the project about the business requirements and data model underpinning the traceability and transparency standard. And thank you very much to Katie from E.ON, to Julie from Apparel Registry, and to Piero from EURATEX ENEA for joining the panel discussion. Actually, very interesting, the concluding remarks, this acceleration towards open and accessible data. The note that still that will take time and takes more effort on the actual implementation, and certainly the need for a framework and a set of tools to support a complex ecosystem of actors to go towards this open and accessible data that will help the traceability and transparency in the industry. Thank you very much to all of you for having been with us and having participated in the event here in Milano and from home, virtually connected. So we are looking forward to a rich third day of the program tomorrow, looking more into the technology model, so the blockchain system that has been developed under the project, the 2 pilots that are running for the cotton and leather value chains, with demos from the partners that are involved in these pilot projects and are showing, what they have been delivering by applying the approach and the standard developed under the project in a blockchain environment. So it will be very interesting to listen to them and to see the concrete results that are there. So I would conclude with that. Thank you. We'll have a nice dinner for those of us that are in Milano. We are lucky to be hosted by the Green Media Lab. Thank you to them for the kind invitation, and looking forward to connecting with you all tomorrow. Thank you.
Look around and at what we wear. We all want to look good, but we also want to make sure that our choices are sustainable and fair for workers. Improved traceability and transparency offers a solution. The story of how our clothes and shoes are made is woven into the products themselves. A system based on blockchain can make it easier to reveal this truth, enabling tracking and tracing of any item from field to shelf. Sustainability claims can be regulated and checked. Business can seize opportunities and embrace a new way of working. End-of-life recycling can be improved, and the way clothes are made and used can be redesigned. With reliable data, we can come together to make more responsible choices. The Sustainability Pledge. Track it, trace it, wear it.